final episode of Harlan Coben's Lazarus delivers one of the most devastating and psychologically twisted endings in recent television history. What started as a straightforward investigation into a psychiatrist's suicide transforms into a multi-generational nightmare that exposes the terrifying reality of inherited evil. Episode 6 doesn't just wrap up loose ends. It completely destroys everything we thought we knew about the Lazarus family and leaves viewers questioning whether some people are simply born to kill. The episode opens with Joel Lazarus finally confronting the truth about his father Jonathan's death. Through a series of recorded sessions that Jonathan secretly made in his office, Joel discovers the horrifying reality that his respected psychiatrist father wasn't just treating disturbed patients, he was actively manipulating and killing them. The recordings reveal Jonathan's twisted philosophy about freeing people from their pain, which was really just his justification for murder. What makes this revelation even more disturbing is how Jonathan convinced himself he was doing good work, describing his victims as broken vases that could never truly be repaired. The most shocking part of these recordings isn't just Jonathan's confession to multiple murders, but his manipulation of Detective Allison Brown. For years, Jonathan had been feeding Allison information about his patients, essentially using her police work to frame innocent people for his crimes. Allison thought she was building a successful career by solving difficult cases, but she was actually just a pawn in Jonathan's elaborate cover-up scheme. When she finally realized what had been happening, the guilt and horror of her unwitting participation drove her to confront Jonathan in his office. The tape of that final confrontation between Jonathan and Allison is absolutely chilling. Jonathan shows no remorse for his actions, instead calmly explaining his twisted logic, while Allison struggles to comprehend how she'd been manipulated for so long. The recording captures the moment when Allison realizes she has two choices: either confess everything and destroy both their lives, or find another solution. The solution they settle on is Jonathan's suicide, which Allison presents as the only way to end the cycle of violence and cover up without destroying her career and reputation. What makes Jonathan's character even more terrifying is how he connects his murderous behavior to the death of his daughter, Sutton. He explains that something fundamental broke inside him when Sutton died, and that this brokenness transformed him from a caring psychiatrist into a calculated killer. This revelation adds a tragic dimension to his character, while simultaneously making him more frightening. The idea that grief could transform someone so completely challenges our basic assumptions about human nature and the possibility of redemption. Joel's reaction to discovering these tapes is heartbreaking to watch. Throughout the series, he'd been desperately trying to understand his father and even seeking his ghostly guidance. Now he realizes that the man he'd looked up to and tried to emulate was actually a monster who destroyed innocent lives. The scene where Joel finally confronts his father's ghost is incredibly powerful, as he tells Jonathan that he won't follow in his footsteps and chooses to break the pattern of inherited evil. The episode also resolves the mystery surrounding several characters who had been framed for Jonathan's crimes. Arlo Jones, the serial killer who insisted he was innocent of Imogen Carswood's murder, was actually telling the truth. Jonathan had killed Imogen because he loved her and wanted to end her suffering from terminal illness, then manipulated the evidence to make it look like Arlo was responsible. Similarly, Father Frank, who killed himself in prison while maintaining his innocence in Harry Nash's murder, was also one of Jonathan's victims. The priest had made a recording before his death claiming innocence, but Allison buried it to protect the conviction. Detective Allison Brown's storyline reaches its conclusion when she tries to escape after Joel and Seth confront her with evidence of the cover-up. Her death in a bus accident feels both tragic and fitting. She was ultimately another victim of Jonathan's manipulation, even though her ambition and willingness to look the other way made her complicit in his crimes. Her final moments show her realizing that there's no way to escape the consequences of what she'd helped enable. The revelation about Detective Brown's involvement also explains many of the series' earlier mysteries. Her suspicious behavior, her connections to multiple cases involving Jonathan's patients, and her attempts to discourage Joel's investigation all make sense once we understand that she was desperately trying to keep the truth buried. Her partnership with Jonathan wasn't initially malicious. She genuinely thought she was doing good police work, but over time it became a corrupt relationship that destroyed innocent lives. The episode's exploration of inherited evil reaches its most disturbing conclusion in the final scenes. Throughout the series, there have been hints that Joel's son Aidan might be struggling with his own dark impulses. The young man had been seeing his grandfather's ghost and seemed to have an unusual fascination with violence and death. These warning signs culminate in the episode's final twist, which reveals that Aidan has apparently inherited his grandfather's murderous tendencies. The last scene shows Aidan standing over what appears to be a crime scene, holding a bloody serrated weapon. The victim seems to be Laura, a woman Joel had been trying to reconnect with romantically. This discovery forces Joel to confront the most horrible possibility imaginable, that despite his efforts to break the cycle of violence, the evil has passed to the next generation anyway. The irony is devastating. Joel spent the entire series trying to understand and distance himself from his father's legacy, only to discover that his own son has become the very thing he feared most. What makes this ending so powerful is how it subverts our expectations about redemption and choice. Throughout the series, Joel has been portrayed as fundamentally different from his father, more empathetic, more moral, more committed to helping people rather than harming them. His work as a psychiatrist seemed to represent a positive use of the family's psychological insights, in contrast to Jonathan's twisted applications. But the revelation about Aidan suggests that some aspects of human nature might be beyond personal choice or moral intention. The series title, Lazarus, takes on new meaning in this context. While Lazarus was resurrected from death in the biblical story, the Lazarus family seems trapped in an endless cycle of death and violence that resurrects itself in each generation. Joel's attempts to resurrect his father's memory and understand his motivations ultimately led him to discover that the evil isn't truly dead. It's just waiting to emerge in the next generation. The ending leaves Joel in an impossible position. As a father, his natural instinct would be to protect Aidan at any cost. As a moral person who has just learned the devastating consequences of covering up murder, he knows that protecting his son would make him complicit in future violence. As a psychiatrist, he understands that Aidan's behavior represents a serious threat to society. The series ends without resolving this dilemma, leaving viewers to imagine Joel's impossible choice between family loyalty and moral responsibility. The psychological themes of the series come together powerfully in this final episode. The show has consistently explored questions about nature versus nurture, the possibility of inherited evil, and the ways trauma can be passed down through generations. Jonathan's transformation after Sutton's death, Joel's struggles with his father's legacy, and now Aidan's apparent descent into violence, all suggest that some families might be cursed to repeat patterns of destruction. Yet the series also shows characters like Joel making conscious choices to resist these patterns, even when those choices come at great personal cost. The ending of Lazarus is deliberately ambiguous and deeply unsettling. Rather than providing easy answers or clear resolution, it forces viewers to grapple with uncomfortable questions about the nature of evil, the power of family influence, and the limits of personal responsibility. The series suggests that understanding the source of violence might not be enough to prevent it, and that sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is turn their child over to authorities. This final twist transforms what seemed like a supernatural thriller into a profound meditation on family, guilt, and the terrifying possibility that some cycles of violence might be impossible to break.